last topic of the day. I mean, like, hey, MCU, man, we know what's coming. We know what's happening. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is going to come hot off the heels off of the events of WandaVision. We've known this for a while. We know Elizabeth Olsen is in London right now filming the sequel. Whether she's still there or not, who knows? I imagine she's still there, which indicates to me she's going to be playing a huge part in this movie. And another person who is going to be playing a huge role in this movie is maybe not one that you would expect, but that's Danny Elfman. That's right, Danny Elfman is coming back to reprise his role as composer of the musical score throughout the film. Now, this is Danny Elfman's second outing in the MCU. His first time in the MCU was with Avengers Age of Ultron, so I had to grasp it off the tip of my tongue. He and Brian Tyler collaborated and they joined forces for Avengers Age of Ultron, which was an interesting collaboration. I mean, I loved that score. I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. Of course, Age of Ultron is my favorite of the 4 Avengers films that we have currently. Who knows? In 3 years, that may change. That may all change. But like currently, Age of Ultron is my personal top pick for my favorite Avengers movie. But you know, before that, we've seen Danny Elfman do the scores for the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2. Now, Natalie, you told me a very interesting fact about the relationship between Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman that I was not hitherto informed of. Do tell.
Well, so it's kind of funny. Like, you and I are probably the only, like, I want to say, of our friend group that we know, we're like movie score nerds. And I know that they're out there, but like, I know that, you know, we're not alone. Our tribe is out there and they get really score nerds. Like, you know, I was a fan of Michael Giacchino and his rise to becoming one of the most prominent composers.
Let me just pause you right there for a second. Every single time somebody invokes his name, it's always a different pronunciation.
I wanted to say Giacchino for a really, really long time. My friend who plays for the Houston Opera, he always corrects me, so I'm only going by his, he's like, it's Giacchino. But it's probably, like, I don't know, I'm probably butchering it now.
Giacchino, Cicchino is another way that I've heard it.
I vote that we change his name to Michael G.
Perfect.
So Michael G.
Perfect.
Michael G's score is so exciting. You know, he started on Lost.
Yeah.
Like, that was like his thing, and now he's like everywhere. But yeah, to get back to the Sam Raimi, Danny Elfman, or Danny Raimi, arguably. They definitely crafted what we think of as Spider-Man, at least in a cinematic universe, you know, back in the, early 2000s, 2002. Back in the day, that was Spider-Man. It wasn't everybody's Spider-Man. It was definitely an era of Spider-Man. But Danny Elfman's music is still iconically associated with Spider-Man. And they had a really good relationship. And, you know, that's why he came back to do Spider-Man 2. I think his Doc Ock theme is freaking on point. Beautiful. Like, I love that music. However, it was sometime in the filming of Spider-Man 2, or in the post-production when they're actually doing the composing, where Danny Elfman and Sam Raimi broke up. They had a huge falling out. I remember reading an article about it from Time, and I think the idea, like, it was some pretty harsh words being said.
Well,
like,
I just looked it up here in IndieWire, and I'm not going to be able to pull it up on screen right now, but from what IndieWire says, and I'm reading this for the first time, so apologies if it's going to sound a little long-winded, but IndieWire says, after the superhero sequel, meaning Spider-Man 2, things went very sour with Elfman telling Chud, the magazine, back in 2005, in an interview that seems to have stuck in their archives, that Spider-Man 2 was a miserable experience. Quote, "It's like my connection with Sam got completely severed. As far as I'm concerned, he went to sleep. Somebody put a pod next to him, and when he awoke, he wasn't the same person I'd known for a decade. He went he went from he went from right there, number 2 on my list of favorite directors, to the exact opposite of what I look for in a film experience. Everything I could do on Spider-Man 1, I couldn't do on Spider-Man 2. He got so intensely attached to the music that I couldn't even adapt my own music close enough. It's the first time I've ever walked from a director in 20 years. I'd rather go back to waiting tables than to do Spider-Man 2 again, to have that same experience. Burn. So those were the
wait
words.
tables.
Yeah.
So I mean, since then, obviously, because Raimi and Danny Elfman are teamed up for this movie, apparently they came together, and I think they worked together on the Oz movie,
They did,
if I remember
2011,
correctly. Yeah. So I mean, at least they made up. That's great.
Oh yeah, it's true.
But
well, I mean, this is also not the first time that Danny Elfman's had a falling out with the director. Like his longtime collaborator Tim Burton, they had a hardcore falling out, and it wasn't for years until they reconnected. I'm sure somebody in the comment section could probably direct me on which film it was that they had a huge falling out, but it was big. I dare say it was bigger than this one.
Yeah. What was exciting though is, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, the score, like even the score albums were widely, where people actually bought soundtracks for movies. But Spider-Man 3, it was actually a real bummer for me. The score was never actually released because Danny Elfman had started, I think, the process on writing Spider-Man 3 when he, dropped out completely. And they had a younger composer, Christopher Young, come in and finish the score. So actually, he's the one who's credited as the composer for Spider-Man 3. I also feel like there are certain themes in Spider-Man 3 that are probably the most beautiful I've heard put to a movie. Particularly some of the Sandman stuff. I just, for what? I wonder what the delineation was. That always made me curious.
Yeah, I mean, like, it makes me want to go back and watch some of those commentaries, like the live commentary over the movie. And I don't know if any of that stuff is ever going to see the light of day. Like a lot of this stuff, a lot of that drama that we hear about, like, oh, there was a breaking down of a friendship. There's this weird thing in Hollywood where, like, sometimes you want to be true to thine own self, be true, but you also don't want to burn bridges. And it's when you start talking smack on other people's projects, on like, Hugh Jackman had a really great answer to everyone's reaction of X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now, we all know X-Men Origins Wolverine was a complete garbage movie. It's a complete garbage movie. Throw it in the trash, whatever. And Hugh Jackman acknowledges it. He realizes this. But in an interview, this speaks to the classiness that is Hugh Jackman. One of the interviews asked him point blank about, like, what happened? Why did this movie just turn out to suck? And I'm totally going to paraphrase here, but Hugh Jackman's response essentially was, like, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. We all do the best work that we can. And at the time, like, the script looked great. We thought we were making something really, really wonderful. And it's no one person's fault, to say that the movie is garbage, is trash, is unfair to the filmmakers, to everyone who poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this movie. Did it turn out to be a great movie? Maybe not, but that's not what we intended to do. Sometimes, like, the people's best intentions just fall apart without the fault of any one person. Now, sometimes, yes, movies do fall apart from one person's bad decision making or whatever. And a lot of times we like to point blame at directors, but sometimes it's the actors' involvement. Sometimes it's the producers' involvement in some of these movies and projects, and sometimes it's just everyone. Sometimes there's no one finger to point at anyone, and sometimes things just don't turn out the way that we want. And so I thought that was a really classy response from Hugh Jackman. And yeah, sometimes things just don't work out. So I would love to hear a lot of those behind the scenes conversations as to, like, why did this relationship fall apart? And, like, how did you get back together?
Yeah. I mean, there is a thing called privacy, but I am so I'm actually painfully interested in this story, which is I think the only people on earth that are like up for like, oh yes, composer drama. I'm so
Man.
excited. Give me more of that.
Well, again, like I don't know, like I think it's fair to say that maybe John Williams is possibly the greatest film composer of all time. Some people would agree with that. Some people would disagree with that. My other personal favorites include Thomas Newman. Like Thomas Newman, man, ranks high on the list. Of course, Danny Elfman, Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer.
Even going back in time a little bit to Bernard Herrmann is one of my favorites.
My boy Michael G.
Michael Giacchino, Cicchino.
Oh, Alan Silvestri, though.
Alan Silvestri.
Alan Silvestri. Oh.
Man, like Back to the Future. Everybody always thinks that John Williams did the score to Back to the Future. Nay, I say. That was an Alan Silvestri score.
Exactly.
What do you think? What you talk about? Anyway, guys. Say what?
And I was like, yeah, he always gets the credit for that. But Alan Silvestri is like that underdog composer. I Infinity War and Endgame, I think he did both of those. And
the first
score
Avengers.
in Infinity War, the movie. Like I feel like even I mean having people fade away to nothing, that's all sad. But the music, Thanos' theme.
Man.
All of that. So I'm excited to see composer like Danny Elfman take a swing at Doctor Strange, which feels very much, like it's up his alley. Obviously, they're going for more horror-esque. In the sequel, they're going for something a little bit more campy horror, which, that is Sam Raimi's bread and butter.
Let me ask you this. All right, so in the first Doctor Strange, written and directed by Scott Derrickson. Scott Derrickson is a huge horror guy. I'm not going to say he's more horror than Sam Raimi, but he's more hardcore than Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi now coming in to take the reins of the second Doctor Strange movie. Before the first film came out, there were all these promises, even from Kevin Feige, saying that
my boy Kevin
F. I know, like Feige. How do you say his name? So Kevin Feige was making all these promises saying that like how dark and scary Doctor Strange was going to be. And it's not. Again, like all these promises of like, oh, it's going to be such a mind-bendy movie. The visuals were mind-bendy, but the concept, the story of the movie was not mind-bendy at all.
I wonder how much the editing process and how much the studio, because I very much like it's possible that Derrickson 100% intended and was hired to really lean into the horror aspect of it. But once they actually, started screening the cut within the studio, I mean, we were just talking about how down the line things start to break down. That would definitely be a time where they just cut back the horror. Like they cut, changed the music, changed, the tension, like kind of diffuse some of the energy. Because they also, again, were like, hey, this is Doctor Strange. This is still the MCU. It's still kind of like phase 2, phase 3 MCU where like things are, starting to move in a direction dark, but it was still, let's reel it in. This is still for kids.
So my question for you is, Natalie, how much of a horror film, because again, Kevin Feige has been playing up the horror aspect of it. Oh, we're getting Sam Raimi in, classic horror director. We're getting, now it's Danny Elfman. Ooh, classic, like not horror, but like weird music composer. Do you think this is going to be more of a horror film, more of a scary? I definitely think it's going to be darker in tone, but I call BS. I call BS when they say that this is going to be a horror movie. This is going to have like some scary elements to it. What do you think?
Well, my thought on that is when you go back and watch the original Spider-Man, and there's Giacchino getting stuck in my throat right now.
Okay?
Sorry.
Got a little Giacchino stuck there.
The shots that Sam Raimi put together in Spider-Man are very reminiscent of horror film. You see it again in Spider-Man 2. The whole Doc Ock scene is basically a B-movie horror thing. So I think that there's a way they can do that. They just have to get the right.
I would like to point out in the comment section, Natalie, your husband just commented, "Bring back Dormammu."
God. Hey, he might be out there.
Who knows? He might
out
be.
There.
I do like that they're bringing back Mordo, so hopefully we're going to get more of that story of there's too many sorcerers. I would very much like to see that story play out further. Anyway, guys, big question for you is, what do you think of Danny Elfman joining the crew of, maybe not the cast, but the crew of Doctor Strange 2 in the Multiverse of Madness? I find this incredibly exciting. I love Danny Elfman. I love his music. I love his tone that he brings and his stylings. But I also understand it's maybe not for everyone. So what do you think of it? Jump on down the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, click like. If you really like this video, click subscribe. And if you really, really like this video, click share. Because that is exactly what the mighty Thor would want you to do. For Asgard!